On today's show, the Houston Rockets have pick number 17 in this year's NBA draft by way of the Brooklyn Nets. And what are some of the names that might make sense for the Houston Rockets to be taking a look at with pick number 17? Today, we take a look at Tyty Washington, Nikola Jovic, and Tari Eason and break down each of those guys, their prospective fit with the Houston Rockets, whether or not they'll be available at 17 and more, coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
With the second pick in the 2021 NBA Draft, the Houston Rockets select Jalen Green.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep getting better every day. I'm going to keep perfecting my craft. And every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian, also host of Locked On NBA Mondays, host of the State of the Rockets podcast, as well as founder of ClutchCityControlRoom.com. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets. Now, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. As always, appreciate you making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. Joining us now is a good friend of the show, draft expert and founder of T and Rockets, in-depth Rockets coverage, breakdowns, analysis, all of that. Nathan Fogg, you can follow on Twitter at Nathan Fogg1. Nathan, it's been a minute since we've had you on the show, and now we know I can't say no, but we know at least where the Brooklyn Nets pick is going to fall, and that's at pick number 17, and that's where we're focusing our efforts for today's show. Some of the guys, the interesting names at pick number 17. So we've got three guys lined up today that we're going to be talking about. We've got Tari Eason, we've got Tyty Washington, and then we have Nikola Jovic, who I feel like a lot of Rockets fans in particular are very excited about Nikola Jovic. But let's start with Tyty Washington as the first name that we bring up here on this list of players out of Kentucky, freshman point guard, good size, 6'3", 185 pounds. Kind of walk me through your initial first impressions of Tyty.
Well, I remember my first impression where I was like, who's this 10-year-old on a basketball court? Because he looked there's something about his stature. He just looks small, even though he's like 6'3", which is a tall man. He just looks like really diminutive. But he just puts his arms out and you realize he's got this insane wingspan. And he's just this very sort of competitive player who like, even though he looks really unimposing in a way, to me anyway, just first glance, first impression, he's really competitive and he can be a difference maker on both ends. I think it's a reach that he'll be available at 17. I think this is definite move up territory. He did have obviously a disappointing end of the year and the tournament, so there's a chance he could slip. But this is someone who a lot of mocks have sort of 12, 11, that sort of New York, Charlotte range, who you never know what they're going to do. So like Tyty is a supremely skilled player, I think, as a pick and roll operator, as a shooter, who's, young and the fit is, a bit odd. A lot of these players in this range are guards where you think the Houston need more guards, but it's Malachi Branham and Johnny Davis again for move up potential, Tyty and EJ Liddell. Well, he's a forward, but more of a scoring hands-on player. So it's an odd fit, but I am like a Tyty truther. I think Tyty was having this amazing stretch until about January, and then he kind of got injured. He got a couple of injuries, and he tried to play through them. But if you look at his stats through to like mid-January, it was basically like 50% from the field, 40% from free, and there's this kind of like guy who can attack space against drop. So the thing to know about Tyty is that he's this very much of the ilk of kind of like a Chris Paul, CJ McCollum. Like he doesn't get to the rim a lot. And he does, so most of his shots are in mid-range. So I remember thinking, like, this is such a tough way to live as a guard in the NBA. Like, he basically has to shoot incredible. And then you look at his shot and he shoots incredible. So it's kind of like, as long as he can hit 50% or like 60% from the kind of the elbows, which he does, then that's going to be great. But it's such a high bar for him. And right now he's clearing it, but that's such a tough way to make a living, obviously.
It's so weird in the amount of games that I've seen of him play and you and I kind of evaluate prospects a little bit differently. You go really deep into like full game analysis of these guys, and that's something that like I need to get better at doing. But in the clips that I've seen of him and what I have seen, it reminds me very much of like kind of like old school, like Andre Miller a little bit. Like that's a bit of a throwback name for depending on the age of our fans, depending on the age of listeners. But just his overall like control and feel for the game is there, and I think that's definitely something that kind of stands out. And you mentioned obviously the Rockets kind of had this glut at the guard spot for sure. But they don't really have, I feel like a lot of Rockets fans think that Jae'Sean Nix can kind of be this guy, right? That more so traditional, like point guard, good feel for the game type guy, as opposed to KPJ, who's like balancing being like a dynamic scoring wing as well as a point guard. And I feel like you get a lot of that with Tyty Washington. It is more so that general, on the floor, somebody who can really get you into your sets and kind of orchestrate an offense, better than what I think we've seen at times out of some of the current Rockets guard rotation.
Yeah, I think he's a shooting guard, a point guard masquerading as a shooting guard. So the thing to know about his team is obviously like he doesn't play with like kind of these rim running above the break centers. So like the most common play he'll do in pick and roll is a pick and pop with Shibwe from the free throw line, which is like just not something that exists in the NBA. If you do running a pick and pop, it's high pick and pop above the break on the freeze. So and we saw this in the tournament game, like he just had nothing going. He was just so cramped, and they've got all these 6'9" forwards who aren't really centers. I mean, Shibwe is an amazing player, like he's a great college basketball player, but when you're trying to transfer like guard skills to the NBA, he just doesn't have that. I would be, most NBA teams play drop coverage, and like if you give Tyty, a pick and roll center, he'd just absolutely destroy any team in drop because he's just running into floaters and open mid range shots where he's just one of the best mid-range shooters that you'll see in any draft year. He's got the opportunity to be, that kind of Devin Booker, CJ McCollum, Chris Paul type player. That potential anyway to be just killing teams and forcing them to go away from their preferred drop schemes. So many teams want to hide bigs now who have talent. The NBA shifted towards centers having talent. Houston Rockets have got a couple ourselves who maybe you have to hide them on defense, and Tyty is a guy who just completely exposes that. The real question about him is just whether he can be a playmaker, for 36 minutes of the game, or whether it's just sort of 10 minutes here and there, and whether he can make those high level sort of pick and roll reads that we just didn't really get much chance to see because he's not playing in an NBA system.
What have you seen out of him defensively that either stands out in a good way or in a bad way? Because you talked about his stature, and that was something kind of that stood out to me a little bit too. Is when I first started watching him and before actually pulling up like his bio and stuff and like looking at his actual actual metrics, I was like, this guy does seem a little small on the floor. And I wonder if that's going to be, an issue for him defensively, maybe getting taken advantage of by some bigger guards at the NBA level.
Yeah, I think, I think off ball, first of all, is his like defending two guards. So I think Tyty is like an amazing chaser. So he's so good at chasing off ball, and he cuts spaces and shoots the gap so well because it's just so fast off the mark and his agility. And like he just goes around screens so fast, and like if he can go under a screen, he's meeting you there immediately. So like I've got this cut. I'll probably put it up on YouTube at some point, on Twitter at some point. But I just clipped like 20 videos of him just chasing off ball, and it's like amazing. And when so many like teams like to get their off ball, whether it's just a two guard, but they might have like a Jalen Green, you'll have him start off ball. Tyty's got the potential to make someone like that's life miserable just by never giving him any ounce, and like he just recovers so well. In terms of on-ball stuff, I actually think so. This is where you talk about like the deep dives. Like anyone who's been on Clutch Fan for long enough will remember this legendary thread about James Harden's anterior pelvic tilt, which means that he has a body where his kind of butt sticks out, his belly kind of protrudes forward, and it kind of makes him look fat when he's not actually that fat. And I think Tyty's kind of got something like that where his kind of torso really sticks out quite well. It's almost like pigeon chested. And this is so weird to talk about like somebody else's body this way, but it really helps him defend drives really well. He absorbs contact very well. Kind of like CJ McCollum kind of like had that Harden-esque transformation of his body where like he's small, but he just kind of got like thick around the waist and around the chest kind of thing. And obviously put a lot of work in the weight room. I actually do see Tyty being able to do that. And the way he absorbs drives is actually way bigger and way more strong than you you would think. And I think he's getting some help from like his body there. And obviously if he hits a weight room in the NBA as well, I think he has potential to be actually quite good, drive defender and on-ball defender, as well as he uses his wingspan in passing lanes, as good as anyone you'll see. Yeah, which is great for, a lot. He's got, I don't know what his wingspan is. It's probably 6'10", but he uses it so well for disruption and helping. So overall, I actually think he'll be a good defender.
We probably should have led with this, but this is just my fault for being an absolutely atrocious host of this show. But of these three guys we're talking about for pick number 17 right here, we've got Tyty Washington. The Athletic has him mocked at pick number 15 to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Tankathon has him mocked at pick number 11, I want to say it was, that I'm making sure. Yeah, pick number 11 to the New York Knicks. Of these three guys, Nathan, if you had to order them 1 through 3 and who you'd be most interested and then kind of least interested at pick number 17 for the Rockets, if all three of them were still on the board, how would you order them?
100% it'd be Tari Eason first, who I think is just a perfect fit for Houston, which we'll get into later. Then Tyty, then Jovic.
Okay. All right. Well, then we're going in the completely wrong order here as we're saving Tari Eason for last. Coming up, we're going to talk about Nikola Jovic and what he would look like potentially here for the Houston Rockets after a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting stats and info. Find out the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, the NBA draft, and more. And speaking of the NBA draft right now, who do you think goes number 1 overall in this year's NBA draft? You can look at the odds for that over at BetOnline right now. Jabari Smith Jr., my favorite for the Houston Rockets, is minus 125 to be the number 1 overall pick. Then you got Chet Holmgren at plus 215, and now Paolo Banchero, a distant third, at plus 325. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And continuing on here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, appreciate you for making Locked on Rockets your first listen each and every day. For your next listen, be sure to check out the Locked on Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Nathan, it's funny that I think, maybe you're a bit lower on Nikola Jovic than maybe the consensus of Rockets fans, because I feel like that's a name that keeps getting thrown around a lot. And I feel like a lot of Rockets fans would be very content with taking Jovic at 17, but I feel like that's almost maybe not reaching for Jovic a bit, but a lot of mocks that I keep seeing have Jovic a bit more, later in the first round, around like 24, 25, 26, 27. That kind of area. I will say that I am intrigued by Jovic because he feels like a really talented, just all around prospect, especially when you consider that, that 3-point shot, 34% on the season for him. But I think that when you look at the way that he shoots, there's hope that he's, there's nothing like mechanically wrong with the shot. It's a good looking form. And if he can really get the shot, to a bit of a higher percentage range, 35, 36, 37, he's just a really all around good player, like a jack of all trades type guy. At least that's my first impressions of him.
Yeah, well, it's the shooting that worries me is actually the 2-point shot. So he's shooting 48% from 2, and most of those are at the rim. It's not like he takes long twos or anything. I don't know what's happening. I mean, smaller sample size, he didn't play that many minutes last year, but he was like 70% from 2, and now he's just dropped so much. And he's hesitant when going to the rim. This is something that causes a lot of turnovers for him. He's become kind of like this pass-first guy who's trying these crazy passes because, like, it looks, it stands out for sure, and it probably looks good on highlights. And I think, a lot of people see, 6'10" European who can pass. We think, wow, that's very like a sexy pick. But I think he makes a lot of bad decisions on the drives. I think he will drive. He doesn't want to go up to try and finish over traffic, where he's just bad at it right now. And he'll throw the passes, and it's like he goes under the rim and he makes a wraparound wing pass to your ring, and you go, oh, that's cool. When you realize there's nobody there and it's a turnover. Like, I don't know. He kind of passes without seeing, who's there. And a lot of people think is this really good passer. So I think I'm in the minority on this. So a lot of people, listen to other people as well. But, and he is a good passer, for 6'10" for sure. But like, he's just, I don't see this great vision. I don't see this wow, he can be a playmaker. I wouldn't want to have him bring him the ball up and running pick and rolls, which is what he does a lot for Mega Basket right now. I think he throws it away and he turns the ball over a lot. I think he's got like a 30% turnover rate on pick and roll ball handling, because he just it's like a vision where he'll see a guy, but then he won't see the defender coming to close him out, and then it's like a steal. So it's a lot to work on him for that. I mean, if you want to just take a complete swing on high upside, he's 18 years old, and the fact that maybe he can even see these pockets in the first place makes him, potential. But for me, it's the lack of finishing at the rim combined with not being like, he's a good passer. I wouldn't say he's a great passer. He's a good ball handler. I wouldn't say he's a great ball handler. So it's a bit like jack of all trades, master of none. Other than the 3-point shooting, where I think he does have this really great form, and I think he's shooting 38.8% on catch and shoot threes. Weirdly higher on guarded catch and shoot threes, 14.5%, because obviously he's just got this high release point. So I think he does have a really nice stroke, and that he could be a high 30s guy, which when you're 6'10", that's very appealing. But when it's combined with maybe not being the force he is on the ball that people might think he is, and the defense, which is a struggle, then obviously that's why I don't particularly like him. And the fit for Houston when you've got Christian Wood and Alperen Sengun is questionable too.
Whoa. We're not manifesting Christian Wood still being here next season. Don't do that on this podcast, Nathan. Come on. I know that we've been heavily focused on draft stuff in all your recent appearances, and we haven't quite talked too much about the rest of the Rockets roster, but clearly I did not slide you the memo quick enough that we're manifesting Christian Wood being traded. I hope he has a great career away from the Houston Rockets, but we're trying to get Alperen Sengun as the starting 5 next season. And I do think that
Jovic and Sengun is that's not going to work either defensively. I mean, Jovic defends the perimeter like all the time for Mega. He doesn't really play as a drop man or the rim. And he's okay. Like you could even say he's decent, but he's decent against Serbian competition. And he gets shaken out of his position all the time on the perimeter because he's very bouncy and it's quite, he's trying to be on his feet and like move around and stuff and not be flat footed, but you can just rock him one way or another with a juke or a head fake or a crossover in and out, and he's just like out of the play and he has to recover. And every guard in the NBA can do that. Your backup point guard DJ Augustine can do that and drive past you and get to the rim. He won't. I don't think, and I think he's helped a lot because Mega has like 5 guys who are all 6'10". It's like it's difficult to scout Jovic on your laptop because they have like 4 white guys who are 6'10" who have short cropped hair, and you have to like look for the numbers on the back if you watch it on like 360p or whatever. So like it's a bit like Cleveland. So like if he played with Mobley and Allen like Markkanen does, and he defends the perimeter and he just kind of, he's tall, has his arms up and funnels them into great shot blockers, then he'll be fine. But if he's like isolated on islands, defending pick and rolls and isolations, and he's the 5, or he's only got 1 shot blocker behind him trying to rotate, then he's going to really struggle. So in Houston, he's going to really struggle because we don't have defense anywhere really, but certainly we don't protect it. Unless we get Chet Holmgren, then it kind of gets a little bit interesting. But yeah.
I was about to say, so what you're saying is draft Chet Holmgren with the first pick at the top of the draft, and then you can entertain the Nikola Jovic pick a little bit more later on in the draft. And it's, I do think maybe we do get a little bit caught up in like, 6'10", European, good feel for the game, quality passer, maybe a bit of that, like maybe a bit of a point forward kind of vibe. But the way that you're talking about it, maybe he's not necessarily, maybe he shouldn't be used as like the primary point of like, a playmaker for a team. And maybe, do you think maybe he could, flourish as maybe like a secondary playmaker, somebody that, you get him in the middle of the floor after like setting a good screen, something like that. And then he can be kind of the connective tissue for an offense rather than the guy initiating things.
Well, I think in that sense, I prefer Tari Eason. I'll talk about it a little bit more, but I prefer his actions, whereas Tari will get in a dribble handoff position and he'll like fake and drive to the rim, and it's a bit more versatile, where Nikola Jovic, he just wants to bring the ball up and run pick and rolls, and it's very much against like set defenses. It's not like this attacking gaps or like improvisation type of thing, like maybe Eason does. I've done this round before. I don't know if I've done it on the show, but like I don't really care if you're 6'10" who has a good handle. I care if you've got a good handle for an NBA player. I'd rather just have a 6'3" guy with a better handle attack. And like if you can attack mismatches and attack big defenders, obviously that's good. That is a positive. But I fell for the Christian Wood stuff in Detroit when I was looking at the highlights, thinking, oh my God, he's bringing the ball up, he's doing this, he's passing out the short roll, and it's amazing. And then you realize, like, yeah, Christian Wood's probably in the top 1% of 7-footers who can handle the ball, but like he's probably in the bottom like 10% of NBA players who can handle the ball. It's just like it's like hipstery, sexy thing that was very like in a few years ago when everyone thought basketball would be 1 to 5, 6'10", but that's not happened, and you still have you know, you look at Utah, Spencer Dinwiddie and Jalen Brunson killing them right now in Dallas. Like you want ball handlers who are just very good. The standard in the NBA is so high that just because you're 6'10" and have a handle, that doesn't move you as much as probably it did a couple of years ago.
You know, if we could just equip everybody in the NBA with a handle like Eric Gordon's, I feel like the league would be better off for it. Just because I would love to see.
He has one move and he knows it, and he's going to do it, and he's going to kill LeBron James with it.
On that note, I feel like we completely downsold Nikola Jovic here, so there's going to be a ton of like Rockets fans listening to this and be like, "Never mind, I'm scratching him off my board,
the shooting,
send him down to the second round."
Yeah, look, I mean, he's 18, and you know he's got a bank of skills that are, you know, he's got a lot of options to get good in a sense. And the shooting, the fact that he's like a 40% catch and shoot guy, or 39%. That's such a weapon. Like you look at, you know, Markkanen getting hot in that Cleveland playing game against who did we play in Atlanta, I think, where he was just killing him in the first half. Like having basically just acting as a spot-up shooter. Like shooting is good, and there's not many great shooters in this draft. So even if you just saw him as a guard, who's like Malachi Branham is a guard whose best asset is that he's a good shooter, and Nikola Jovic is a good shooter. So even if you just forget everything else, for shooting is there, and that's a plus for him for sure. Like I would be very intrigued if Houston pick him. I wouldn't pick him, but he might be the best player left on the board. So I wouldn't be like, oh shit, we thought. I would be like, oh, this is actually an interesting pick at least, and he's got some skills.
Interesting tools to build on it for Nikola Jovic, to be sure. But apparently we saved the best for last. Nathan's favorite pick here, Tari Eason. We're going to get there in just a moment after a quick message from our friends over at Built Bar. When it comes to protein bars, you got to check out Built Bar. They are the #1 protein bar on the market. They've got so many incredible flavors to choose from. But before I even get to the flavors, every single bar is coated in 100% delicious chocolate. They're not gritty or chalky like other protein bars out there. The consistency is never off. And again, the flavors, they've got so many great options to choose from. Raspberry, strawberry, salted caramel, mint brownie, peanut butter, my personal favorite, coconut brownie chunk, cookies and cream. You really just can't go wrong with any single flavor on their menu. Every single bar is going to be low cal, low sugar, high protein, high fiber. Amazing if you're on a keto diet. Amazing if you're trying to cut back a little bit, lose a little bit of weight, all of that. You can check them out. Just go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your very next order of the best tasting protein bars that are out there on the market right now. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, appreciate you for making Locked On Rockets your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, be sure to check out the Locked On NBA podcast. From the first jump of the play-in tournament to the last possession of the finals, Locked On experts take you deep inside the playoffs with insight and analysis affecting all 30 teams. I host the Monday show. It's always a ton of fun. Be sure to check that out wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Nathan, as we get here to Tari Eason from LSU, he's a little bit older than some of the other guys we're talking about. He'll be 21 by the time the draft rolls around. And, you know, sometimes people look at that as like maybe like a weakness because, you know, players don't have, I guess, as much room to grow, improve, whatever. If they're, you know, I guess maybe there's a bit more of an idea like, oh, if you're 18, 19, like you can grow, you can get better at this, that, and the other thing. And, you know, so coming out 21, but he's, you know, a 4'6'8", good size, 215, 220 about. Give me your elevator pitch for Tari Eason because you seem incredibly excited about him.
Yeah, so I was scribbling some notes before we came on. So, and I didn't do many on. So this is Ty. Can you see?
Okay.
This is Jovic, and then like this is Tari, and it's like I've got more just sheets. I've got all Tari. That's all. I exposed myself. It's all blank. But Tari, I love Tari. So I've got.
Let me just throw it out there for our audio only listeners. You know, I know we got some nice ASMR there of you flipping through your notes. You know, but it looked like it was about a quarter page of notes on Ty, then maybe about a half page of notes on Jovic, and then it was just like a complete full page on Tari Eason, and then like more notes that he was like flipping through. So
like Tari. So whenever I watch Tari, I think this guy's like should go like 6 or 7, and then I remember that his age is 21, and then I think, oh yeah, actually no, fair enough. He's old. Tari's like my absolute perfect dream fit for Houston because he's just got size. He can defend the perimeter. He's one of the best defenders in the draft. He can defend fours. You know, he's a power forward who can defend multiple positions. Those are just so valuable in the league. Like you look at, you know, I was thinking this the other day. Like you look at what Aaron Gordon went for, and Aaron Gordon, everyone knew was kind of like flawed player, but he went for basically 2 first-round picks, including RJ Hampton or. Robert Covington had that really struggled series against OKC where he was kind of exposed on the big stage. We got 2 first-round picks for him. There were just, and Larry Nance is like had this. I think he got a first and then another first from Portland and then New Orleans. So like these players who aren't, no one would say like, oh, they're elite players, but are just any defensive player at the 4 who has any sort of semblance of an offensive game is just valuable because there are just so few players like them and like Tari Eason who you can put on a Kawhi or Paul George and switch him onto like Dame and blitzers and things. Like he defends the perimeter like every possession for LSU, and he's got that size to, you know, like my absolute dream, which is like this is what I wake up. I go to bed every night thinking of this, and I wake up every morning thinking of this, which is Chet at 1 and Tari Eason at 17. Or we have to move up to get him because it's like you've just got this amazing front court defensive, you know, locked in for the next 10 years. Where you could probably put Tari on. You know, always question about can Chet guard Embiid or whatever. I bet you could put Tari on him a bit like what Houston did with PJ Tucker and have Chet helping like baseline. And then you could actually have something going because you've got the size of Tari and then the wingspan of Chet to sort of disrupt and weak side blocking. So like, I think they're a great tandem. And I think Tari is like, you watch him for 2 minutes, you'll see he's so good defensively. He's got good hips. He switches stances left, right. He can move his hips very well. And he absorbs contact very well. So defensively, he's just like, I just want him like so bad, and I would give up anything to move up if we have to. And he seems to be sliding a little bit on mocks. So like I would have thought no way he's available at 17, but recently he's kind of getting there.
You know, you mentioned kind of his switchability. As far as some of the mocks go, right now The Athletic has him mocked at 14, I believe, to the Charlotte Hornets, and then Tankathon has him mocked at 10 to the Washington Wizards, so a bit higher.
Yeah, I saw Jonathan Wassman for Bleacher Report had him 18 picked after Houston. And that gave me a lot of hope.
Where you're just like that one guy, you're like, please be true.
This is my guy.
You know, you mentioned, you know, just obviously the switchability, and that's always, I feel like that's one of the first things that we jump to, especially in today's NBA, where you almost have to be able to guard multiple positions unless you're the true 5 on the floor. And even then you're going to, you know, we see moments where you get barbecue chicken out there on the court if you can't, you know, keep up with some of the twitchier, you know, guards in the league, or if you don't have a defensive scheme that at least, you know, covers you in that sense. But with Tari, you know, his physicals don't exactly jump off the page. I mean, he's 6'8", he's got a good size. I don't know his wingspan right off the top of my head. I don't have that here in my notes. But has he shown you enough where he looks like one of those guys that even at 6'8", you feel really comfortable throwing him on some of those bigger guys like an Embiid or like a Jokic? Maybe a la a bit, you know, I hate throwing this comp around because I feel like we overuse it at times, but maybe a Draymond Green in the sense, somebody who utilizes their physical gifts really well, despite not, you know, jumping off the page with their physical attributes.
Yeah, I think Draymond's got a longer wingspan. And he's kind of got that center of gravity where he's got again, it sounds a bit weird, but he's got a lot of like junk in the trunk. Like it keeps him grounded in post-ups. I don't think Tari's quite like that. And the one nitpick is that I wish he had a bit longer wingspan. I think he's like 6'9". It's like only +1 or whatever. If he was like 7 foot, it's great. But he contests really well on the perimeter anyway. He's got a quick first leap, and like he gets his arms up really well. A bit like PJ Tucker did. Tucker didn't have a great wingspan really. It didn't seem like it anyway. So yeah, I think mostly it's the fact that he can guard the perimeter, and you know whether he can stick him on a post up against Jokic and Embiid, like that's, you know. It's a few years down the line where maybe he puts on a lot of muscle and he seems like he's got body to add a lot and just become this kind of like bowling ball, a little bit like Tucker. But for me, it's the big thing is that, you know, how many 6'8" guys can actually guard guards, like we saw with Robert Covington, and you know eventually they get mismatched because they just can't move the hips and they're not as fluid. Whereas I think Tara is actually very fluid, and I think that's, you know, that is what he does at LSU, and obviously there's higher competition at the NBA, but. You know, that'll be such a weapon for Houston where you have like 6'5", 6'6", KPJ and Jalen. And then, you know, if Şengün's going to be the starter down the line, then you need defense and isolation defense at every other position, switch 1 to 4 and keep everyone away from the basket to protect Şengün, and Tari like just slots in perfectly. And then obviously we can talk about offense. I love his offensive game as well.
That's what I wanted to get to that next, because give me like a comp in your mind, somebody that the play style kind of mirrors a little bit for Tari Eason when you watch him play offensively.
So what came to my mind was Josh Smith when he played for Houston. Well, I always remember Jalen Rose saying that, because Josh Smith's nickname was Jay Smooth, and Jalen Rose said it should be Jay Rough because he plays like this really rough style of basketball. And for some reason, I always remember that line. But like he's a very like physical driver. So like Tari will catch a ball at the top of the key, And the thing that I love about Tari, he's got a 51.5% free throw rate. So for every shot he takes, well, for every 2 shots he takes, 1 is a free throw. One is a trip to the line, which is the best in the NBA in the draft. So like it's way higher than and to have him and Şengün, who's really good at it as well as free throw, like foul merchants on drives. He'll get the ball at the top of the key and he'll like look for dribble handoffs and he'll turn. Şengün does it as well. Jeff Green did it a lot for Houston, which is one of my favorite moves in the NBA. And when you're driving on a 4 or a 5 from a perimeter where you're looking for a pass and you suddenly drive, it just invites hand checks immediately. So he gets hand checks a lot. And he's just such a physical driver. He digs his shoulder, and what he's really good at is he'll have his head down because he's pounding, dribbling, driving to the rim, and he can suddenly pick his head up, and then he transfers left, and he's finishing. So he's very aware situationally of what is going on, even though he kind of looks a bit like he's just kind of a bit like Eric Gordon, where it's just digging in with his shoulder and really physical. So he's this really power driver. Which is what I think will really translate to the NBA. And he's not the quickest. He's athletically, he's not a high leaper or anything, but he's strong and he takes really long leaps. He only a couple of steps to the basket. So the free throw shooting and the driving, where there was a spell for LSU where he just became their first option basically, and he started averaging 20 points a game, and he was unstoppable. And having that's when I talked about Jovic, that's a sort of secondary playmaking I like, where it's you're looking for a dribble handoff, you're looking for a delay action where the big man has it at the top of the key. And then you just there's nothing on, so then you just drive. And that's the secondary stuff I like, and I think what Tari excels at.
Those are some of my, you mentioned you love seeing it when Tari does it, when Şengün does it within the Rockets offense. I love those plays because they almost surprise you as the viewer, right? Because you're expecting, okay, he's looking for the dribble handoff, he's looking for this, that. You almost bait the defense into that false sense of security, and then if you're quick enough to be able to turn on your heel and just power towards the rim, you can easily create some contact, get some easy opportunities that way, or create for your teammates. How is Tari's ability to create for himself when he doesn't have that element of surprise, right? Is he a guy that you can give the ball to and, expect him to create out of the high post, maybe get to his own shots, or is that not quite in his bag yet?
I think he has a nice stutter rip move where he'll fake one way and just quickly go the other way. Like I said, he's not someone you just give the ball to 20 possessions and ask him to create his own shot. In the NBA, maybe he just averages 8 points per game and he's just a defensive stopper. But the fact that he even has this stuff at college level, I think it gives me some hope. And then obviously the 3-point shooting is what a lot of people are down on him by. But his 3-point shots, so he shot 39% on catch and shoot threes, 44% unguarded, and most of his shots. So he only took 11 corner threes. So I think 80%, 90% of his shots are above the break threes, which that's makes it a much harder degree. And he actually shot 48% from the top of the key. So 36% overall. So just if I'm throwing all these numbers out, he didn't shoot overall great. But when most of your shots are coming from above the break, that gives me hope that it's going to translate a bit to the NBA. And they aren't these kind of incredibly easy shots where it's just getting spoon-fed corner threes. So I kind of like his shot. It's a bit it reminds me of the basketball robot. If you've seen that, where he kind of shoots a free throws and his arm cocks back so much. It's it's mechanical, but it's kind of fluid, and it's all in motion. So I kind of like his shot, and he doesn't pass up threes. He only takes 2 or 3 a game or whatever. So he's not this high volume guy, but he's not someone like Jae'Sean who just passes up so many open threes. He wants to drive, and drive is the first option as it should be because he's so good at him. But when he's just passes to him and he's wide open, and you think can shoot it, he will shoot it.
Well, that's a good sign, because I think some of those were probably the most frustrating plays to witness this past season. Is Jae'Sean Tate catches the ball in the perimeter and the big is dropped all the way down into the 10 to 15 foot range, just ignoring him completely. And he's not even looking to shoot the ball or do anything with it. He's exclusively looking for that next dribble handoff or to set the next screen or whatever. And those were kind of mind boggling plays, because you're a 6'4" wing out there and you're wide open and not willing to shoot the basketball. It's tough to see. When you look at Tari, do you have a biggest red flag for him necessarily, offensively or defensively? It could be either side of the ball, the thing that gives you the most pause for concern with him.
Not really. I mean, I think he is a little bit unathletic, so he's below the rim a lot, and they put him in the dunker spot quite a bit, and he struggles to finish there because he just can't. He's not a big dunker in terms of just that jumping and catching lobs or whatever. But a lot of players, as long as he just keeps that free throw rate up and is able to just carry that strength over to the NBA, I don't think he's got this huge glaring hole. I mean, the 3-point shot, yeah, it's low volume, so it's always going to be small sample size, and he's going to have to keep working on it. But like, if I could give you right now Jae'Sean Tate, but with 4 extra inches, like you take that like 17, that sounds amazing. So, and I don't think he's got the touch around the rim as that Tate, where he's got these like drop steps and turnarounds, and like he doesn't have the kind of finishing craft, but he's got the brute strength, the brute force to do it. So that's the only worry where does that translate fully against stronger guys in the NBA? Does he have an advantage that he's 21? I mean, there are some big guys in, and the paint is quite full in college, so you could argue that it'd actually be in a sense easier. But yeah, if he adds like a jump shot and a floater and kind of that type of thing, then it's like, I mean, I don't think he will, but that's when it becomes very, very exciting. But give me just like 6'8" role player who can defend multiple positions and drive and hit open threes, and like, yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that at 10, to be honest. Never mind 17.
It's crazy because you look at some of the guys like historically who have had to like overcome, being, a bit more undersized or smaller for their positions or whatever. And like, obviously Jae'Sean Tate's the one that comes to mind for Rockets fans like right now, but you can even look at a PJ Tucker, right? Somebody who had to really grind to get to where he was as a defensive stalwart in the NBA, a bit more undersized for his position, but really just, the technical aspect of the game was there. He worked really hard, outworked a lot of other guys on the floor. You go back to even, let's go back to even a guy like Chuck Hayes, who an undersized, 4'5", defensive, specialist, if you will, during his time with the Houston Rockets. And you wonder if those guys would have still had the same level or drive to be as skilled as they were in their respective positions if they weren't undersized, if they weren't, if they didn't, because they didn't have some of the gifts that their opponents had. So they had to outwork, they had to outplay, be smarter than their opponents. And maybe that's, kind of the trade-off here is Jae'Sean Tate has that innate ability, the finesse to finish in and around the rim and in the land of the trees, but he's had to have that ability because he's not just 6'8". He doesn't have just the brute force to go up against some of those guys in the land of the trees. But you mentioned, wanting to trade up for him. And in last year's NBA draft, we found out after the fact that the Rockets were willing to move all the way up to even pick number 6 to try and get Alperen Şengün, and they wound up, stealing him at pick number 16. So how high would you be willing to go, in trade negotiations, in trying to trade up in this draft to pick up Tari Eason? Like, where's your cutoff for him?
I mean, right. So very quick, like obviously you're not getting in the top 5, so then it's like out of the top 6, it's like Keegan Murray, Benedict Mathurin. Like he's my perfect role player fit for Houston. So like, I would be targeting Charlotte, New York. I think Poland didn't get that pick on, so that takes a team off the board. But like, I would be looking at like 9. I would. The question is what you're giving up, and like if you can trade Christian Wood for PJ Washington, and a chance to get Tari Eason, and I'd do that in a heartbeat because I love that trade. So like, I would be very, very aggressive moving up in this draft, and I would trade the 2023 pick and the Milwaukee 2023 pick and 17 to get Tari Eason. I would say.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's. I mean, I feel like this entire podcast just turned into a Tari Eason propaganda show, but with good reason. I'm a little bit higher on Tari Eason now coming in. I thought he had some dynamic potential, looked really good, but now I walk away feeling a little bit more excited about him and down a bit more on Nikola Jovic, which I didn't expect to quite happen. So with that, that's going to do it for today's edition of our Houston Rockets prospect breakdown. Nathan, you know the drill. Let our listeners know where they can track you down at Nathan
Fogg 1, and I'm going to be doing very, very long deep dives on the top 5. So I've got a big Jaden Ivey video probably coming out next week, so I'll be tweeting that out. And yeah, pour a cup of coffee because it's going to be, I think, nearly an hour long. So
I definitely look forward to, the breakdowns that you do. Obviously we do these, draft breakdown podcasts, and I walk away feeling like a more informed fan because of it. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll be sure to share that on all of, my social channels, the Locked On social channels, all of that to help promote it, get it out there. But as always, a pleasure to have you on the show, man. Looking forward to doing it again soon.
Cheers, Jackson. Thank you. Everyone Google anterior pelvic tilts.
On that note, we wrap up on anterior pelvic tilt. Hopefully you enjoyed today's breakdown of some of the interesting prospects at pick number 17 for the Houston Rockets. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google. Check us out on the Odyssey app, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Mentioned the YouTube side of things a moment ago. Check us out on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe, all of that. How do you feel about Tyty Washington, Nikola Jovic, and Tari Eason after this episode? Let us know in the comments. I do read each and every one of those every single day. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.